Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dawn Smith. I am the MCAT Manager of Engagement and Outreach, and thanks so much for joining us today. The Association of American Medical Colleges is so pleased to welcome you to today's virtual fair session, How to Hijack Anxiety for the Med School Application Process. And as a reminder, the session recording will be available approximately 24 hours after the live presentation, and the link will be posted in the auditorium of the virtual fair platform. So we will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the presentation, but feel free to enter your questions at any time within the Q&A box. So we've muted all participant audio, and it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rosie Hunter. Dr. Hunter is the founder and CEO of TestWolf, an organization that uses cognitive behavioral strategies to help students overcome test anxiety. In addition to her formal education, Dr. Hunter trained as an active duty Army psychologist at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center and was deployed to Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne Division. The Army was the foundation for her understanding of trauma, courage, and leadership, guiding how she practices today. Please welcome Dr. Rosie Hunter.
Hi, thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Laura. Thank you to everybody who puts this session together and who allows me to come and say a lot about what I'm passionate about, which is courage and performance under pressure. And I just want to say to everybody who's out there trying to become a medical professional, trying to become a physician, you're awesome. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for trying to enter this profession that is increasingly something that requires courage, right? So. I want to give you everything I can to help you succeed at the MCAT, to help you succeed in the application process, and to face it with confidence, no matter what the outcome turns out to be. So we're gonna talk about some evidence-based strategies based on my training in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I promised Laura and Dawn that I would go in the AMC, that I would go fast this year and have plenty of time for Q&A. But please use the chat to put any questions you have in the chat, in the Q&A as we go along. Feel free to have a side conversation. I'm an elder millennial, but not that much of an elder. And so I don't mind a side chat going on at the same time. I also put these little notes here, or these little sort of camera signs to let you know what you should take a picture of, right? Take a picture of certain slides because they're jam-packed with information. And I hope that will help you. And that's something you can take with you in addition to the video being available later. Okay, so yes, this is exciting for me because I'm excited to be with people who are preparing for the MCAT. And so let's just start by having an MCAT-ish question, right? What if you were an expert in anxiety and someone needed your help? So if you're on the call right now, think about your multiple choice question hat, put it on, and think about what you know about preparing for the MCAT. And here's a multiple choice question just for you. What if you were an expert in anxiety and Ellen, which is my actual sister's name, was preparing for the MCAT. And she's been preparing for months, 350 hours. She's doing all the things that people say that you should do. She's got support and resources from her pre-med advisors at her school. And she has established well-developed prep program. She's got that one of those programs, and she's paid a lot for it. And she's guaranteed a score of 515. I know some of you may have been already found your target score, you're aiming for it, you're in a tutor situation and you have a goal score and everybody's thinking about it. She's within range of her goal score on the last full-length practice test. However, 3 weeks ago, her heart started racing and sweating during that cars practice. Everybody knows about that cars practice. Everybody knows that cars section can be a big challenge. 2 weeks ago, she had a full-blown panic attack while taking her last planned practice test. And she's scheduled to take the MCAT in 2 weeks. Okay, now let's imagine this is like a little vignette question. There's probably a few people on the call who are already in med school and used to these vignette sort of case study type questions. This is the scenario, right? This is the stem of that question. Now, the question is, you're the expert in anxiety, and Ellen is headed into medical school. What is she going to do to manage this anxiety with the MCAT coming up? So you can prescribe a mild medication to relieve anxiety. I don't know if you guys can you guys see this slide okay? To relieve anxiety, tell her to take it before she practices her next practice test, and 10 minutes before she arrives at the testing center on that day. I see a lot of thumbs up. This is, again, something that is probably treatment as usual in a lot of places. All of these things, by the way, wink, wink, are treatment as usual. So there's not going to be an obvious answer, right? You can tell her to keep studying and use grounding techniques, right? So we've heard of some of these. Splash some water on your face. Take a deep breath. If you feel anxious, take a break, go to the bathroom. Practice some of that deep breathing. What would you do? You can ask Ellen to understand the autonomic nervous system. Tell her that thoughts about having a heart attack are catastrophizing. Girl, if you can walk, you're going to be okay. And I love that Aiden has popped into the chat, and you all are welcome to pop in the chat. We want a holistic answer, and I'm just for fun artificially constraining this to one of the choices. But I love that focus on a holistic idea. D is to teach her to intentionally overbreathe to elicit difficulty breathing and other discomfort for 10 minutes daily and before and during a final practice test. And E, recommend she keeps studying. She has a little bit of time, postpone the exam. Now, I know all of you all feel like if you don't get into med school when you're 22, your life is going to go on beyond you. And I bring you greetings from 42 years old and say, postponing sounds terrifying, but it's a possibility, right? Recommend she keep studying and postpone the exam for a month to explore what the test symbolizes and the origins of perfectionism, fears of failure, and other root causes. So these are our 5 choices. If you are the expert in anxiety, there is one choice on here that is actually preferable to the others from an evidence-based perspective. So go ahead and in your head or right in front of you, if you're like me, you have paper all around, Post-its, just scribble what your answer choice would be and try to think about it. All of these things should seem familiar and none of them should feel wrong because these are all treatment as usual kind of answers. But I'm a flair for drama, okay? So this is a to be continued. We're going to get back to the right answer. Right answer. But I want to do a couple things first. Yes, I know some people are appalled. I saw that reaction. I'm not a motivational speaker. As Dawn mentioned, I am someone who has studied anxiety for a long time, and I believe that everybody can be an expert in anxiety. I believe that anxiety is the kind of thing that anybody who has a therapist or somebody who has a coach, it should be an open conversation. And so today we're going to have an open conversation where I try to translate everything you need to be an expert in your own anxiety when it comes to the MCAT, when it comes to applying to med school. And so we're going to come back to Ellen. We're going to come back to these options. We're going to first go to Anxiety 101. And the thing to remember is that I'm a therapist, I'm a psychologist, I'm a behavioral scientist. I am not like a gamer streamer, right? And so I'm going to mess up a little bit on my sort of computer thing here. And you're going to have to take pictures of the things that are interesting to you and ask questions at the end, and no question is off limits. Okay, let's get to Anxiety 101. Right, so you can become an expert in anxiety. Let's talk about the foundations of anxiety, Anxiety 101. One of the questions that I get most often is, where does anxiety come from? And the simple answer is it comes from being human, right? Take a look at this primordial forest, right? This is where we all came from. We all are the descendants of the older brained humans. And the humans who in this primordial forest did not run from the saber-toothed tiger, those are not our people, right? We are the descendants of the most skittish folks that ever existed. The skittish ancients, our ancestors. If you didn't run from all the threats in the primordial forest, you are not our ancestors, right? So we are super skittish folks. Anxiety comes from our bodies as a gift, right? It is a gift of survival. So you all, 2 weeks into your medical school experience, will be able to describe this better than I can. But the first gift that anxiety has given us is the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And this is that tendency to be startled where your brain doesn't even wait to have an intellectual understanding of what's happening. It says, this is a new scenario. It feels like it matters. And so I'm going to dump chemicals and hormones, and I'm going to change the way that we are operating our big systems. And I'm going to do that fast, right? So we start needing extra oxygen to scan our environment, start that overbreathing, right? We're going to need blood to our big muscle groups. So we're going to need blood to go to our legs. We're going to need blood to go to our arms, just in case we want to fight that saber-toothed tiger that is coming to our cave, right? That is the fight, flight, or freeze response. It allows you to have these options so that when your brain does engage, it can have a choice, but about how it deals with this saber-toothed tiger that's in your cave. We even shut down things like digestion, right? I would say to people, and this is something that I'm just going to say because you all are all future doctors and you're all interested in this. Did you know that cognitive behavioral therapy is an evidence-based treatment for IBS? There's a reason for that, since we're having an honest conversation today. There's a reason for that. That's because our gut is a part of our fight, flight, or freeze response. I love the little faces popping by. Our gut is a part of that, right? Our body is inherently related to what's happening from a fear perspective. So when we talk about anxiety, we're talking about a gift of fear that allows our body systems to shift. Okay, so the fight, flight, or freeze response has a lot of sort of things that we recognize that are the residual effects of it, right? So when our body is trying to do this thing to keep us safe, we might feel heart palpitations, dizziness, indigestion, headache. If you ever see me presenting, I will always have on like black because I don't wear gray because my fight, flight, or freeze response, my fear response involves armpit sweating. I don't know. Some people have forehead sweating, some people's feet sweat, right? We all have our different brand of this fight, flight, or freeze response. And so it's critically important to us when we feel this that we're going, oh my gosh, I'm under threat, right? What does it mean? And we start to respond to the sensations themselves. And so you probably know yours. You probably know what happens when you sit down for that MCAT, when you sit down for that practice test, when you imagine your interviews, when you imagine applying again for another cycle and what that's like. Your body has its own brand of this thing. Here's what I will tell you about that. Your body is trying to help you, not hurt you, right? Your body is your biggest ally in this managing the future and managing stress and managing the saber-toothed tigers. So the fight, flight, or freeze response is designed to trigger and then acquiesce, right? And so remember that anxiety itself is not dangerous. If you hear nothing else, and it's critically important to know this for these long exams. If the anxiety happens and you stick with it and your body knows that it's not dangerous, it will go down when you don't die. Your body goes, did you die? I don't know. Maybe not. Okay, I'm going to lessen this response. I'm going to dampen this response. Okay, so we have the fight, flight, or freeze response. We have another gift that is fear related, and that is the ability to anticipate the future. I already know if you're one of the people on this webinar, right? And Laura told me about all the people who Laura from AAMC, hi Laura, told me about all the people who registered for this virtual fair, and I thought those are clever folks who want to be in med school. They're planning for their future years out. And a part of that ability to plan for the future is related to anxiety, right? As humans, we have this ability to anticipate threat in addition to this ability to spontaneously respond. So if you are planning to be a doctor and you're already thinking about that, that means you have the power to anticipate future threat. And that is a gift that is directly related to anxiety. We have our old parts of our brain. And again, 2 weeks into med school, you'll be able to explain this more than I can. I'm a clinical psychologist. Back in our brains, we have that old part of our brain. And then our brain grew this big frontal lobe because we're social creatures. It's one of the things that separates me from my cat over there when a saber-toothed tiger pops out. He's going to be startled too, but I'm going to be able to think about like my grandkids and their response to the saber-toothed tiger. And so this big new front part of our brain is the part that anticipates future threats. And that's another gift that anxiety gives us. So we've got the fight, flight, or freeze response. When you hop in that exam, your mouth is dry, your leg is bouncing, right? You feel confused and it's hard to read. All of that is based on a saber-toothed tiger response. And then we have this ability to anticipate future threats, which is what are the things that I need to do to get into medical school, to get my life lined up, to get the dreams and hopes and safety that I need. Oh, yeah, there they go. Okay. So we're hardwired to pay attention to anxiety because it is helpful, it's informative. We have it because we're humans. We're hardwired to respond urgently to avoid threat and to reduce the anxiety sensations themselves because our cave brain, this part back here, doesn't talk to our logical brain. They're right next to each other, but they're not like friends kikiing like that, right? Like the cave brain is sitting back there reacting, and our logical brain is going, whoa, well, what if I want to be an anesthesiologist? What am I going to have to get on step exams? It's doing that logical thing. And we prefer to push for certainty. So that's again a frontal lobe kind of thing. And you all have the frontal lobes that really want to know what you're doing in the future, that you're making a difference, right? That you're going to get a certain score and that's going to lead to this and that's going to lead to that. We love that kind of storytelling. An exam is the exact wrong environment for these kinds of priorities, right? An exam is not what we want when we are scanning the environment. It's not what we want when we're trying to push for certainty. If you enter an MCAT question, for example, if you enter a step one question once you're in med school, your brain is not going to receive the certainty that it wants from the moment that it enters that question. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let me see if I can make myself go away. Yeah, let's just scoot over here. So Anxiety 101, two gifts from anxiety. And then the way that those gifts show up is in four different components of anxiety, right? And so our thoughts, that's the stories we tell, that loud noise in our head. I'm going to fail. I don't know anything about this. My heart is racing out of control is a thought, right? And it's a thought about another component of anxiety, physical sensations, heart racing, sweating, difficulty concentrating. Any brand that you have, like I mentioned, mine is like a little bit of armpit sweat, maybe. And then your behaviors. And behaviors related to anxiety are the things we're hardwired to do when we're afraid, which is avoid, skipping, rushing the decision if we're talking about the MCAT, taking breaks to avoid staying in the question that we're facing that can be stressing us out, or even postponing the exam. And so I'd love to see some reactions from folks who have had an occasion to postpone their MCAT. Just give me a thumbs up if you've had to postpone your MCAT. And it might be from studying the content, but it could also be from this idea of I'm not ready, right? This thought, this idea that I'm not ready. Yes, I love seeing all those hands. I love seeing all the hands, but after we're done, I want you to know the difference between postponing when you really need to study more and postponing because the anxiety, the anxious thoughts are saying, hey girl, you're not ready. Okay, this is DJ Khaled. I'm back. Um, Does anybody know what DJ Khaled's afraid of? We'll do a free coaching session for anybody who puts in the chat immediately. I'm like, what is DJ Khaled afraid of? DJ Khaled is afraid of airplanes. Shermeen. Okay. Nina said it too. Mikhail said jet skis, probably. I suspect probably also jet skis. DJ Khaled is afraid of airplanes. He was afraid of flying. And I was a flight psychologist in the Army. Nobody told the Army that 10 years before I was a flight psychologist in the Army, I was afraid of flying too. But the behaviors that happen when you're afraid of flying include what? Avoiding flying, right? So he had this bus, and he got to the point where his kid was flying to get to his gigs, and he was taking the bus. He had his baby on a, like, that's not a fear that is based on the sort of actual idea that someone could get hurt, right? Because nobody's putting their baby on a flight to get hurt. But he's flying because he was not flying because he was afraid of the fear itself. The fear of that moment was so torturous that he was avoiding it, almost like putting off an exam. You know it's going to be safe, but just the moment of being in the exam itself can be terrifying. And so anxiety is problematic not because of the thoughts, not because of the physical sensations. Anxiety becomes problematic because of the avoidance related behaviors. And DJ Khaled, as we close out this case study, he got some treatment somehow, figured out how to be less afraid of flying, and immediately earned $67 million in 2 years after he got less afraid of flying because the avoidance itself was what was impairing, right? It wasn't the fear on the airplane. It was the fact that you can get to a lot less gigs if you are driving around in a bus versus flying. So earned a lot more money that way. So that the same is true of all anxiety conditions, whether it's social anxiety or PTSD or even obsessive compulsive, which is on the anxiety spectrum. All of the avoidance behaviors are the problem, not the physiological sensations, not those other two components of anxiety that we talked about. Okay, so um, thoughts, physical sensations, behaviors, again, that's where the action is in terms of impairment. And especially when we talk about um, applying to med school, when we talk about interviews, avoiding practicing the interviews, avoiding studying the extra stuff, avoiding taking full length practice exams, all of that stuff is where the action is when it comes to impairment. And we talk about feelings. Um, that is our sort of summary, overarching terms we use to describe just the complex nature of it. Anxiety, I feel overwhelmed. I feel disappointed. And so one of the things I would encourage you to take from this is when people say, hey, how's your med school application process going? Instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, try to describe these actual concrete components of anxiety, thoughts, physical sensations, behaviors, the things that you're experiencing, instead of just saying, I feel anxious. Okay, so what about test anxiety? Let's go back and talk about the MCAT a little bit. Test anxiety can make you miserable. Full stop, right? Test anxiety can affect how you experience this season of your life, which should be a really joyful season of your life. You're marching towards, um, you're marching. So, is it Sonia? I appreciate that avoidance comment, showing up to this anxiety session rather than doing the actual MCAT questions. That is a behavioral component of anxiety. Thank you for sharing that. So test anxiety can make you miserable, right? It can make you miserable by sort of white knuckling it through the season of things. You never know if you're doing the right thing, if doing the right thing is showing up to the session, or if doing the right thing is doing questions. You're just, struggling through it all the time. But test anxiety can also affect your performance because knowledge, effort, approach no longer mean determine your score. There's this handicap, right? Like in golf. It's all that stuff minus anxiety that determines your score. So we want to talk about, for the time that we have, I'm going to talk about how to make anxiety less of a negative factor when it comes to calculating your score. So how do you know if you're experiencing test anxiety? First of all, you all are brilliant, you're very insightful, right? But here are some ways to tell using your question banks, using your UWorld, your AMBOSS, your AAMC sort of question banks. Here are some telltale signs. So right answers changed to wrong answers. I love question banks where you can tell if you had the right answer selected and then you changed it to the wrong answer. There's something that I call slumming, not a technical term, but in some of these question banks, you can look and you can tell what percentage of folks selected a certain answer. And if you narrow it down to two choices and then for some reason choose the choice that 2% of people usually choose, right? Pay attention to that because the goal in test taking is to narrow it down to two answers, make a choice, and move on. It's not to look at a question and get the right answer, right? And so we go around saying people are good test takers or bad test takers. I will tell you a cheat code. Good test takers are constantly narrowing it down to two choices. They're not people who look at the question and instantly know the answer, right? And so slumming means when you're not narrowing it down, you're just choosing a low base rate question or low base rate answer choice, even especially on choices on answers that are on a subject that you're familiar with that you've studied. So I call that slumming. Does that make sense? We can talk more about that if people have questions. Some folks will have this tendency to flag everything because they want to leave everything open, right? They want to, we talked about that brain, that gift of fear that wants to sort of plan for the future, right? And it doesn't want uncertainty, right? And so if you constantly leave everything open, everything I could go back to and fix it. That's what I call the United Nations of flagging. I can look at some people's answer responses and tell when anxiety is on board because, especially in med school, but also on the MCAT, it's very unlikely to get like 7 or 8 questions in a row wrong. That's not possible. It's very hard to do that. And so if we have these losing streaks, chances are there was a question that got in your head and sparked some anxiety. And then we went on this streak of like not really even understanding the questions subsequent to that, right? And so that's one way to tell if test anxiety is on board. Now remember, anxiety cares about you. Your anxiety wants to keep you safe. Your body wants to keep you safe. Anxiety does not care about the MCAT. It does not care about the condition of the MCAT itself. So if anxiety wants you to pay attention to anxiety, and you know this because you're an expert in anxiety now, if anxiety wants you to pay attention to anxiety, it's going to say, "What did you just read? What was that chap? What was that passage just about?" It's going to say, "Hey, is your heart racing?" Instead of allowing you to focus on the question. And it's going to say, "Hey, what are these things that we can think about to make us feel like we have a head start other than the test itself?" Like I read on Reddit, let me move this. I read on Reddit that they would never ask about this, they would never ask about that, right? And I call that spontaneous introduction of irrelevant information or biased information processing. So anxiety wants us to pay attention to anxiety, respond urgently to avoid feelings of anxiety, and to push for certainty. And that leads to the bad test taking behavior, right? There are not bad test takers. Hear me very clearly now. There are not bad test takers. There's people whose frontal lobes, because they have these gifts of fear, come up with some bad ideas, like spontaneously introducing irrelevant information, like that thing you read on Reddit about skipping hard questions, or about how they would never ask about pain, or it's not possible to have two questions about perimenopause, which all of the questions should be about perimenopause. Okay. Um, Yes, somebody asked, could we please go back to the last slide for a screenshot? Let's do it. This one, right? Let me get an extra screenshot. Yeah, the time pressure in cars gives you that feeling, right? And then you feel rushed and you're in your head, you're counting the time and your brain is saying, I should be done with this question by now. And so we want to make sure that you're paying attention to the conversations that are pace related based on your strategy for the test versus related to what anxiety is telling you is happening in the moment. So I've worked with folks who will, okay, let me see some reactions. Does anybody highlight words they don't know? Immediately stop doing that. Nobody said yes. Okay, some people said yes. Immediately stop doing that, right? The question is never going to be what word do you not know? Right? The question is going to be, you know, so and so came into this ER and the enzymes and the blah blah and the cascade and blah blah, right? Answer the question that's in front of you instead of queuing up the anxiety to think, I can't answer this question, right? So some people will say, what don't I know when they're looking at a question and start to decide whether they can converge on an answer based on how they feel when they're taking the question. That's a telltale sign of test anxiety. And so these things in yellow are some of the more subjective telltale signs. And yes, so Grace, thank you so much for asking me to go back. This is going to be a more full slide that you want to take a picture of for sure. So answering questions that weren't asked, don't we want to make sure that you're paying attention to whether your anxiety is saying, hey, did I study this subject yet? Right? Hey, should I know this while you're taking the test? Another thing that people do, especially when there are passage questions, is people will tend to start diving into the stem, and you're trying to anticipate all the questions that could be asked about this particular item, right? Instead of reading the little lead in, which is the prompt that, like it or not, the MCAT step one exams, step two exams are very well written exams. And that prompt that is the question, it's like, what is the theme of this passage, right? What is the author's main idea? That question you should always read first and then drown yourself in all the information that's in the stem, right? So you're not out there anticipating questions that won't be asked. There's 1,000 questions that a good test writer can ask about a single subject. So if there's another one thing that you're going to change after this conversation, even in those passage sections, read, and it's just one question out of five that's going to be about the same passage. Read that lead in. That's what the technical term is. Read that lead in first. Now, y'all, we spent a lot of time on this, so we might not get to some parts, but y'all need to. I'm glad that you're on here today as procrastination, right? As distraction from doing your MCAT questions. But y'all need to stay off the Reddit and the TikToks, right? Sometimes your anxiety says, get busy thinking about the test, talking about the test, trying to get an advantage instead of doing the questions. Because what you need to build is your strategy, not your superstition, and not your, honestly, not too much studying. You actually want to build your strategy to execute the questions. And this comes up a lot with the med school students that I work with who think that you can study enough to answer case study vignettes. You cannot, right? You can study enough to be able to kind of pull your information together, understand the question in front of you, and execute a decision-making strategy. That's the goal, right? But you can never study enough to answer any case study about Billy who walked into the New Orleans VA and, whatever it is. Okay, you can and should be your own expert. Look for the ways that your anxiety is just as clever as you are. I love working with people with anxiety because the anxiety is very clever. You can and should be your own expert in anxiety. And there's two steps, developing your action plan for that execution and challenging and choosing your thoughts. And so when we talk about developing an action plan, what we're talking about is teaching your body the difference between sitting for a test and a saber-toothed tiger, right? Your body needs to know that there's no mortal danger involved in the MCAT, right? There's no mortal danger in your board exams, in your shelf exams, when you get to med school either. So your body needs to know that for sure. And so you have to teach your body that by doing something I call train how you fight, right? Effective simulations that replicate all of the things that you need to put together, you need to feel, you need to be able um, to sort of tolerate in order to succeed on your exam. And that is your test strategy, right? For example, when you get to a passage and you're going to read the lead in first instead of diving into the stem, your body needs to practice that. The conditions in the environment. Do not take all of your practice MCAT questions on a PDF that you print out sitting in your bed with headphones on, listening to whatever you're listening to, right? Make sure that you are, if you can get to your library, you're sitting in a cubicle. It's almost like the testing center where you're going to take the MCAT. Make sure that you're paying attention and to the rules and trying to approximate the rules as much as possible, in addition to the conditions and environment. And you're doing the things that you could do. What are you going to write on that little sort of dry erase board that you get? Practice that during your practice test, right? And the test format, timing, and restrictions. You want to train how you fight. Same is with these videos, right? These interview videos that a lot of people, these situational judgment tasks that a lot of people are doing in the application process that a lot of med schools are doing. Prepare for that too, right? Because you might accidentally get an interview and you want to make sure that you're ready instead of doing that whole I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Make small changes. Turn your camera on when you have Zoom calls, right? Find the camera, look directly into it when you can so that you're ready for these situational judgment tasks and for these video interviews. Tell strangers why you want to be a physician, right? Tell them that this is important to me. I want to be a physician. Here is why. And so you're used to sort of vocalizing that. It's not the first time when you have an interview. And then practice for a set amount of time instead of practicing until your anxiety feels like it has decreased. Uh-oh. Practice for a set amount of time so that you know that you can do it, right? That you can um, sit through a conversation about why you want to be a physician. Does that make sense? Okay, so we want to train how we fight. We want to make sure that we are going around talking about this thing that we want instead of being superstitious about it. Okay, I am going to leave time for questions, so I'm not going to get into the full details of this, but you can Google it. And by the way, ChatGPT, I'm a super fan. ChatGPT is not going to take your job when you become a physician, right? It's not going to do any of the things that I need as a middle-aged woman, but it's going to take my job. It's going to do some great work helping you restructure your anxious thoughts. So ask ChatGPT to do a little cognitive restructuring for you and with you to teach you about thinking errors, to have, when you have the thought, I'm never going to be a doctor, I can't answer this question, you can start to challenge that thought and come up with a rational response so your brain thinks in a different way. And if you go to the AAMC YouTube, you'll see last year I walked through kind of how to do this work. But I'm just going to show you the fruits of the work this year. Suppose you are in the MCAT question pops up. Your thought is, I'm not ready. I have no idea. If I don't know, there's nothing I can do. It's sort of the assumption. Um, and so then you might bail out on the question, right? Because this cascade of thoughts leads to helplessness and frustration. You get whatever your brand of the fight or flight response is that pops up. You might end up, and I'm sure you all have everybody's done this at some point, right? Because everyone who is human and has a frontal lobe and a nervous system experiences anxiety. But you might find yourself rereading the question over and over again, and then guessing instead of a process of elimination. And again, is this a bad test taker? No. This is a person whose decision making process has been hijacked by anxiety. So our goal is to replace thoughts like, I'm not ready, with something more simple and rational, like the correct answer is here. And here's what's great about multiple choice questions. The correct answer is always there, right? It's there somewhere. And the goal, again, is to narrow it down to 50%. And so um, the correct answer is here. I understand what it's asking. I can find wrong answers. And then if you want to be a flagger, you can come back if there's time, if there's some reason that your response would change. You stay engaged, you stay motivated, and this is just a thinking thing, right? This is just a storytelling thing, right? So you read the question, understand what it's asking, narrow it down to two, and keep it moving. And this is something that I really want you to hear. There are no good test takers and bad test takers. There are folks who understand the strategy of test taking and can override that storytelling about being a bad test taker and make it simple, right? So good test takers aren't folks who just look at it and their brain does this Jedi thing and they understand the right answer. They look at it and they read the lead in first, for example, and they don't have to figure out what to do on every new question, for example. So if you have anxiety, you want your brain to have a plan that it can stick to, that is concrete and not that complicated. You don't want to be trying to guess which questions are hard and which questions are easy. Just read the lead in first. That makes sense? Okay. Forgot about her. We're going to land this plane by talking about Ellen. Remember, you all chose reason from this reasonable selection of possibilities. Whatever corner of America or abroad or the Caribbean, or shouts out to all my friends in Europe and India, wherever you are, and you're thinking about getting into med school in the United States, um, or you have been someone who has experienced anxiety, all of these are within the realm of possible reasonable solutions, but one of them is an evidence-based solution. And so we're going to dive into these individual responses, um, looking at a chart, because that's what we do, right? We're scientists, looking at a chart to help us understand which is the best choice. So we have time in the exam across the bottom. We have anxiety, how anxious you're feeling in the exam from 0 to 100. Again, psychologist, not motivational speaker, not tech person, but you see that axis, right? Okay, let's look at this one. Anxiety reducing medication, treatment as usual, very common. Let's suppose the strategy that you chose is A, right? Is it going to work? Probably, right? A little bit. I mean, if you have something like a benzo, if you have something in this sort of beta blocker category, it's probably going to work a little bit. The problem with these long, long tests is that um, it's hard to dose it, right? It's hard to, your body might have breakthrough kinds of anxiety. And the most important thing is the conversation that we're having with our cave brain. So remember that slide that said we're trying to teach our cave brain that a test is not a mortal threat, right? Um, what do you learn if we prescribe a medication? We sometimes learn that the MCAT means panic, but more importantly, we learn that panic is dangerous. So the whole ball game about anxiety is avoidance, right? Anxiety is about behavioral avoidance, and that is what keeps it going, in addition to being the thing that makes it impairing. So if we are trying to avoid anxiety at all times, our brains become more afraid of whatever the thing is that is producing the anxiety. So what do we learn with this strategy? MCAT means panic. Panic is dangerous. We're not dead or experiencing intolerable anxiety, probably due to medication, right? That's what our brain learns, our cave brain learns. Now, I love a little, who doesn't love a little grounding technique? What do they say? Touch grass. I do that. I go outside. I'm like, I'm going to breathe, right? So this strategy of going to the bathroom, breathing, splashing water. If you were the expert in anxiety, it's a very kind thing to teach our patient. However, we're talking about a test. A test is not the same as airplane anxiety, right? Nobody on the airplane that is going back and forth to the bathroom to breathe or have a cocktail or do whatever they're going to do to like reduce their anxiety, they don't have to come back and fly the plane in a limited amount of time, right? The test is complicated because you have to come back and fly that plane. So you're going to experience these temporary decreases when you leave and go and stop looking at the questions because avoidance temporarily reduces anxiety, but makes anxiety go up in the long term. So this is our little anxiety roller coaster we're going to experience. What do you learn? That you have to get up and move somewhere and go somewhere. Look at me scooting across. Ah. You have to get up and move somewhere and go somewhere to avoid anxiety. But remember, your body is not designed to kill you, right? Your body is designed to experience anxiety, to allow you to understand the threat, but the anxious response itself is not dangerous. Sometimes when we spend too much time avoiding the anxious response, we start to believe that the panic itself, the fear of fear itself, as JFK said, the fear of fear itself is the problem. Okay, let me get out of here. I explained the nervous system to you. I explained panic. I explained the heart attack. I did that. And that is not a treatment for anxiety. It's fun to do. And if you've ever been to a psychiatrist, it is super fun to go and explain the nervous system. They probably have a brain on their desk. But if you are helping someone with anxiety and their brain is clever enough, it will override that mansplaining that you did about anxiety in the moment and might lead to avoidance. And right, remember, the more we avoid something, so I'm looking at you all. Who was it that said they were avoiding their questions right now? I need you to go and do those questions immediately after this conversation or after the next talk. Like, not immediately if you're supposed to be in the next talk. Because the more you avoid, your brain says, woo, I escaped that anxiety, that anxious moment. Woo, glad I escaped that anxious moment. And then it says, it must have been because it was a saber-toothed tiger that could really hurt me. Yes, somebody's in the cubicle. Okay, great. So we want to make sure that anything, if we're avoiding things, we get in there and we don't continue to avoid because our cave brain learns what? Something provokes anxiety. Anxiety is dangerous and I'm not dead because I'm avoiding it. It is a standardized test. Okay, this is secretly the right answer. And I see Dawn there helping me kind of wrap up our time. We're almost there. Um, D is secretly the right answer. This is evidence-based treatment for anxiety is to elicit the discomfort on purpose and to sit with it. So yeah, Sonia, do it scared, right? So if you are having trouble with physiological symptoms of anxiety while you practice the MCAT, the goal would be to have more valid simulations and to even elicit that anxiety on purpose and show your body over and over again that it's not going to hurt you. So I love giving these talks because I know that you all are the future physicians of America, right? And you're going to refer people, you're going to say, hey, I know that CBT is an evidence-based treatment for anxiety. Maybe you should go do some CBT, but I want you to know what about it is what's effective. And it's the big B. It's the exposure, right, to the anxiety. So you can talk about your anxiety in a lot of different ways. And that can all kind of amount to avoidance sometimes. It's the exposure to the thing that's safe, but makes you uncomfortable intentionally, that makes the anxiety initially go up, but then it comes back down when nothing bad happens. Okay, so likely goes up. She's less likely to leave. MCAT isn't a tiger. The panic won't kill me. And I'm not dead or experiencing intolerable anxiety because symptoms of anxiety aren't dangerous. And the MCAT itself, or the situational judgment task, or the interview is not inherently dangerous. And we call that habituation. And you do it enough, what we experience is extinction. Now, you all again, big frontal lobes, you know that this is a big deal, right? Applying to med school is a big deal, right? You're not going to be able to gaslight your body into thinking this doesn't matter. It is a big deal. And so, total extinction, where you're just immune to anything related to becoming a physician, is not likely. But letting your body know that that excitement and that exhilaration and that anticipation, that little bit of sleeplessness, all of that is about chasing your fears, and it's normal, and it's going to go away, that you're going to experience the other side of that curve, is so important, because this is going to be a long haul, right? Applying to med school is not like a 2 week master's program, right? This is not an online something something, right? You're going to be in it for a while, and you're going to have to be able to know that these little spikes of anxiety are all a part of your journey, and that's okay. Okay. So for the scenario, just usually this leads into a rant about Freud. That's Freud. The last thing was exploring perfectionism, fears of failure, and other root causes. And 9 times out of 10, when I do this, 80% of people say E. Let's get holistic about it, right? Let's think about this big thing. But let me tell you, anxiety is reinforced by avoidance, full stop. It is not about trying to figure out how both parents and all sets of grandparents, everybody's a physician, and now have to understand all that pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Do the questions, right? Experience, elicit the anxiety on purpose, and practice feeling anxious, and don't spend too much time getting to the deep root causes of why you want to succeed, right? You know why you want to succeed. You know that about yourself. And all respect to Freud, no, I'm a CBT person. You know that. You know I don't have any. So it's not about where anxiety came from. It's about what would make it stop. All right, key takeaways. If you don't have a plan during the test, anxiety will make one for you. Right? You need to have a plan for what you're going to do on each section, for when you're going to take a deep breathing break, for when you're going to read the lead in first, right? For what you're going to do in that little dry erase board that you get. Prophylactics save lives. This is something that was very common. We talked about prophylactics when I was in health class in the 90s, and preparing for an exam by taking practice exams is one of the best things that you can do. And so create those real simulations for yourself. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that, when I had my baby a couple years ago, coming into recovery, my anesthesiologist just wanted to talk about test anxiety. And so, mind you, this is a succeeding doctor in the field, right? So you can be anxious and succeed, right? You can have that anxiety and commit to your purpose and your dreams. And the anxiety is not going to kill you unless you run from it and let the behavioral avoidance get to you. So, having anxiety on board doesn't mean that you're not ready. It doesn't mean that you're in the wrong job, or that you're in the wrong sort of dream for your life at all. So, you know, I think about my anesthesiologist, lovely person. I wasn't in the mood to chat with the epidural, but I was glad that we had the chat. So, all right, let's talk about questions. I think I have some contact information here. Um, I'm on Insta occasionally, and you can go to Test Wolf. There's a contact form, and reach me there. But I see Dawn is ready to get me back on track, answering some questions, anything that I've missed in the chat or in the Q&A.
Okay. First of all, thank you everyone for all of your great engagement that you've submitted. This has been fantastic. So we really do appreciate it. The first question we've got, how would you combat the critical voice that anxiety can create?
Yeah. So if anxiety has a critical voice, and I don't know, again, I sort of casually mentioned ChatGPT. I'm not kidding about that. Having a conversation that is adversarial towards your anxiety, right? Your anxiety needs to, um, it needs to sort of be expressed. Like, don't avoid that critical voice, but be very aggressive towards it, right? Like, say to your critical voice, "Hey, what's your evidence, right, that I'm not good enough to be a doctor? What's your evidence that I'm going to consistently fail?" Right? And there's a couple different sort of, and I call it cognitive restructuring, Google cognitive restructuring. Um, I don't call it that; it's a CBT strategy. But ways to sort of address that voice. The other thing I would really say is to make sure you put it on paper. Um, Make sure you write out your question, your sort of thoughts, that critical voice on paper, and show your body that thoughts are just thoughts. Oh, I see somebody from UT Southwestern. Hi. So yes, put it on paper. Have a structured approach to challenging your thoughts that is going to allow you to um, kind of be aggressive about it. Don't run from the thoughts itself. I think that probably is Delsa. Hi, Delsa. Okay.
Okay. How do you know when a behavior like postponing the exam is a necessary shift in your journey or a behavior that can make a negative impact on your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I would look for the data, right? Like set goals ad hoc, right? So if you say, I want to be scoring this by this time, and if not, I'm going to make this shift, then yeah, then that's when you want to sort of make an adjustment, right? Like you don't want to make an adjustment when the anxiety inserts itself into the conversation in a post hoc way, right? So try to set goals ahead of time, determine when you're going to make an adjustment based on whether you've reached those goals, not whether you just sort of feel anxious in the moment. I think that's critically important. The other thing is to sort of just, again, put things on paper and look for pros and cons, right? Remember, going for it and getting bad information doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? If you apply this round and you get rejections and you get apply again next year, that doesn't mean that you're not qualified, right? Sometimes you go for it and it doesn't happen, and then you go for it again, right? Don't be afraid of negative information.
How can I overcome perfectionism that
Ooh,
leads to overstudying?
yeah, perfectionism. Okay, so where does perfectionism come from? It comes from that desire to try to reduce uncertainty. And it is critically important that you're asking this question at the MCAT stage and not at the step two board exam stage, right? Because when you get to med school, it really is impossible to overstudy, right? And so many folks are already ready for the exams that they're overstudying for, and they're not executing. So the short answer is to say, remind yourself that you're not making yourself safer, right? You're not increasing the likelihood of the outcome you want when you're overstudying if you're not over executing, right? If you're not practicing taking exam items, exam questions, then the overstudying is not adding incrementally. It's just self-soothing, right? It's just sort of reassurance. It's like, rocking yourself like a baby. I know all this stuff. It doesn't matter if you can't get it out the door. So the first thing I'd say is talk to your perfectionist and say, I'm just doing this thing and it's not actually making me safe. Um, Perfectionism is an effort to try to avoid uncertainty, and you're tolerating uncertainty all the time anyway. You're already doing the thing that you're afraid of, right? You're not going to know everything you need to know for the exam. And so the perfectionism, that you feel like you need to know, you cannot avoid uncertainty when you're sitting in front of those questions by studying. So just being honest with yourself is critically important.
What are some strategies to overcome avoidance?
Ooh. Recognizing avoidance to begin with is huge, right? Like sometimes we don't recognize avoidance. I am a notorious like home cleaner, straightener, upper. I even garden sometimes when I have things I need to do that I don't feel like I want to do. And so if you're in the range of healthy habits, then avoidance can be hard to recognize because it's like, oh, somebody needs to take the trash out. Somebody needs to clean and organize the garage. Like it should be me. And so you have to make sure that you are setting your priorities and making it clear. And then any of these, when the good idea fairy comes along, you'll say, wait a minute, that wasn't a priority first thing this morning. How did it become a priority now? That's avoidance. So having a plan ahead of time and working that plan helps you understand when avoidance is creeping in. And you know yourself, right? You know yourself. If by the time you get on this call, right, you're planning to go to med school. Yeah. And so you never want to be in this position of just waking up and like figuring out what I'm going to do to get to med school today. You want to sort of wake up and go to your plan and execute that plan, right? When you're in your most lucid moments, make that plan and then stick to it, and you'll recognize the avoidance.
Can you talk about the relationship between anxiety and a panic attack?
Yeah, yeah. So a panic attack is just one of the ways that anxiety shows up, right? And a panic attack is a symptom of any of the variety of anxiety conditions that are out there. So you can have a panic attack if you have social anxiety and you're giving a presentation. You can have a panic attack if you have obsessive compulsive disorder and you can't wash your hands in a moment. Or you can have panic disorder where you have panic attacks that spontaneously pop up and you start to avoid things, right? And so a panic attack is just the fight or flight response on speed, like just going, wild. And the best thing about panic attacks is that they cannot last. Our bodies are not equipped to have a panic attack that lasts a whole day or even, a whole month or, so we use that term kind of loosely, but a true panic attack is like instant, feels like cardiac arrest, like feels like a full-blown thing. And then it goes down. You can have sort of this residual feeling of like, what just happened? But the thing to know about a panic attack is that it won't kill you. Most people have one in their lifetime, right? When something happens at the wrong blood sugar level, you can kind of have what feels like a true panic attack. But it's not the kind of thing that is inherently dangerous or that you need to work to avoid. You need to figure out the association and learn a tolerance for discomfort in your body as opposed to learning to avoid discomfort in your body at all cost. Very counterintuitive, not TikTok advice, but evidence-based.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I find that when I don't know the answer to a question, I spend far too long on it and I can't stop thinking of it when I move on to the next question. Do you have any tips to not
Mm.
dwell on things you're just not fully confident on?
Yes, great question. Fantastic question. So, in my work, especially with step one, again, having a plan is critically important when you enter a question. It's not the goal to look at a question to figure out, oh, do I know the answer or not? You want to read the lead in, you want to get the information. Before you look at the answer choices, pause to predict what a good choice, what a good answer would be. Look for choices that are not correct and then have a theory when you narrow it down and just know that whatever your theory is what you're going with. Choose an answer and move on, right? So you need to get satisfaction out of the narrowing down process. That's what allows you to move on. It's not getting the right answer all the time. And so this is why you have to practice that in your practice questions and your practice test. This is why, oh, you guys, don't practice in that mode where you get the right answer immediately. Don't do that. Like if you've studied and you're taking blocks of questions, don't practice in like practice mode, practice in exam mode so that you experience that uncertainty and you expose your tutor mode. That's right, Aiden. Thank you. Don't practice in tutor mode, practice in exam mode so that you get that uncertainty experience after you've narrowed it down and you practice moving on. So sometimes a deep cleansing breath will help, but sometimes knowing exactly what you need to do when you look at the next question, read the lead in, get into the stem. What are you going to write down? You're going to pause to predict what a good answer will be. Then you're going to look for those answers and look for the answer choices one by one, right? Is this something that fits my like hypothesized answer? No, crossing it out. Is this something that fits my hypothesized answer? Potentially. Is this something that fits my hypothesized answer? Yes. Okay, I'm going to leave it open. And then you have B and C to consider once you get down to it. So if you're having trouble moving on, only look at the answer choices after you've predicted, and then look at the answer choices one by one. So you're not creating a swirl that goes with you to the next question. Hope that.
Okay. As we wrap up, can you give us just one key takeaway?
Oh no, I can't give nothing, Dawn. That's ridiculous.
I know.
One key takeaway: you can do this. You can do this. You can be your own expert in anxiety. You can absolutely start to attack the test and not let the test attack you. Attack you. Yeah, and we need you, right? Like you're on the right path, right? Fight for it. stay in it, and just be strategic about it, and you can do this.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Hunter. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As a reminder, this will be available in 24 hours in the virtual fair platform. Thanks again and have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye. Thanks.